Hello everyone, and welcome to the BMES Professional Development webinar titled Launching a Startup from a University. My name is Ben No. I'll be your moderator today. I'm currently serving as the BMES Industry Affairs Committee Chair, and I'm an R&D Program Manager at Medtronic in our Minimally Invasive Therapies group in Colorado. Before we get started, just a few announcements. The archive recording will be available shortly after the webinar on the BMES website, bmes.org. Also, you may submit questions through the webinar using the online chat function to the lower left of your screen. We'll have about 15 minutes at the end, so your questions will be addressed by the speakers at that time. And then also we ask that you stay on the line after the webinar just to complete a brief survey, just to tell us how we did, give feedback on the speakers and the content. We really appreciate your feedback on today's presentation. Go through a couple quick polling questions here. So which of the following best describes you? Are you an undergraduate student, graduate student, postdoctoral fellow, professor, industry professional, clinician, or government professional? Leave this open for a few seconds here, and then we'll check out the results. All right, we'll check out the results here. So looks like mostly students, graduate students, also have a fair number of professors in the line as well. Next question, how much experience do you have with the university tech transfer process? Would you consider yourself advanced? Are you experienced in that area? Intermediate, maybe you have some experience. Little experience, maybe you're a student that has taken some courses or understand a little bit, or do you not have any experience in that area? All right, let's take a look at the results here. So it looks like a fairly beginning crowd, evenly no experience and those with beginners as well. So looks like we'll have some good presentation material for you today just to give you the basics and some insights on how to launch a startup from a university. Next question, how much experience do you have working with a startup business? Same categories, just different from the technology in the previous slide and looking at the startup in particular on this slide. Okay, so maybe a little bit more experience. We have a few folks that say they're intermediate here. Still mostly beginner crowd, but looks like a little more startup experience in the audience. Two more questions here, and then we'll jump into the presentations. Do you currently have a startup business or a potential startup business looking for funding? All right, so it looks like about a third of the audience do have a startup that's looking for funding either through venture capitalists or angel investors or other mechanisms. So I think we'll have some good advice here and just some good experience from our presenters on really their pathway in getting some funding for their businesses. Last question, going back to that technology or product, do you have one that's ready for licensing or acquisition by a larger company? All right, let's take a look here. So mostly no. We do have a few people that believe they have a technology or product ready for licensing or acquisition, and we'll give some great experience on those as well. So moving into our first speaker is Dr. Jonathan Gunn, who is the CEO and co-founder of Briteseed LLC, which is a company born out of the 2011-2012 Northwestern University Newvention Medical Innovation Program. Jonathan earned his BS in Biomedical Engineering from UC San Diego, PhDs in Biomaterials Engineering and Nanotechnology from University of Washington, and a Juris Doctor degree from Northwestern Law. He has published 15 peer-reviewed articles in biomedical engineering, and his training in IP law provides Briteseed unique insights into its patent and legal strategies. So please welcome Jonathan. Jonathan, go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Really pleased to be here with you all this afternoon. And as Ben noted, I've been in sort of the bioengineering field for some time, since I was an undergrad and a member of the organization in the year 2000. Received my PhD studying biomaterials, remaining active with the society through my time developing out intraoperative imaging agents at the University of Washington, and then took a slight bend in my path because believe it or not, my folks are both attorneys, and so I was compelled to become a patent attorney after getting my PhD. But while I was a law school student at Northwestern University, I actually co-founded Briteseed, the company that I now lead. So it's been an interesting and exciting pathway. I'm excited to share with you my experiences along that pathway, and in particular focus on some of the lessons that I've learned as a bioengineer, leader of a small team that focuses on developing out surgical technologies, and in particular sharing my insights, having participated in a program that helps to launch companies like Briteseed out of the university, and how we interacted with the university and got our footing outside of the university in the global biomedical engineering landscape. So with that, I'd like to share a little bit more about Briteseed. As I said, we're a surgical technology company based in Chicago. We got our feet under us in 2013, and we started our journey as graduate students, the co-founders did, at Northwestern as a part of the Nuvention medical program. Nuvention was and still is, a class that was modeled after Stanford's biodesign program that many of you may be familiar with, and certainly the biodesign textbook is a very influential one that focuses on the development of medical devices and the early commercialization of those technologies based on early fact-finding in the hospital and being able to identify clinical needs and user needs, and then creating a technology and the foundation for a company thereafter. And so Nuvention was special because it brought students together from across the university. It brought students in from the School of Engineering, from the medical school, the business school, and the law school, which is where I joined. And over the course of 6 months, we had to take a long look in the operating room where we were focused on to identify where there existed specific problems, and to think about ways in which we could address those problems and funnel those potential solutions down into technology area that could be translated and de-risked and carried forward in a new venture. And so that is where Briteseed was born. So as a part of this class, as I said, we focused on the operating room, and we looked at the trends in the operating room and specifically focused on what's called minimally invasive surgery. And this is a type of surgery where the patient, instead of being sort of filleted wide open and operated upon in an open setting, small ports are placed on the abdomen of the patient, and then these long instruments are sort of poked through the patient, and the entire surgery is conducted while watching a monitor. And there's a lot of advantages to this type of surgery. Quicker recovery times. Patients get out of the hospital quickly. There's less scarring. There's less risk for infection. But there's some inherent problems. And one of the things that we saw was that there's an inherent issue of the loss of touch, the inability for the surgeon to actually feel and palpate where hidden blood vessels exist. They're not able to see quite as well, and that leads to a significant amount of cost in the operating room. there's added OR time. These procedures typically take longer. There's inadvertent cuts to blood vessels, ureters, and bile ducts. And there are what are called conversions from minimally invasive to open surgery. So if a surgeon really has a problem, they're not able to see as well. And so they've got to actually convert it to an open surgery. And so what we recognized was that all of these costs add up and are costing our healthcare system quite a bit of money, more than $6 billion annually based on the 2.3 million procedures that are conducted annually. So as a part of this class, we took a step back and said, how is it that universities and top teaching institutions can incur these types of costs given the expertise of the surgeons that are conducting those surgeries? And so that's where our team came together to form a group that would actually address that through smart surgical tools. And so our takeaway from that sort of early time in the classroom and in the operating room was to create a team and a solution that could implement on the vision of smarter surgical tools. And so that's exactly what we did. We decided that we were going to create smart vessel sealers and smart surgical tools that actually have imaging directed directly into the jaws of the surgical tools that surgeons are already looking at. We actually integrate optics into the top and bottom jaw, so diffuse optics, just LEDs and a barcode scanner for all intents and purposes, into the other jaw. And then we use sophisticated algorithms to help to identify what the surgeon is grasping onto and provide a diagnostic component into the tools that they're already using. And then as the surgeon scours the operative field, they're able to identify those key landmarks and visualize them on the screen through a picture-in-picture view in real time. And so what's important is that here the surgeon is using the same tool that they already used, except now that they're smart and they can actually visualize and see what they're grasping onto. And they're able to take that information in by looking on screen. And so we carried forward and helped to build out a business plan around this technology, this idea. And so we took a long look at what types of surgeries were available to us, and we focused in on ones that had a high degree of intraoperative complication. We found colorectal, gynecologic, and thoracic surgeries as being those that could be problematic. And we further defined how we could actually build a product that could be sold into the hospital. And so just taking a step back, I think it's important to note that, we were a team of about 9 people in the original class, and when the class ended, about 4 of us decided that we wanted to move forward with this. At the time was really just a project. And at that point, we were unpaid graduate students. We had 1 provisional patent application, and it was assigned to us as individuals. And so it was really our own venture that we were carrying forward. We weren't connected to the university in any way, but we were really looking to move out of the university through just sort of a loose group of graduate students that would then form a team external to the university. And so the first thing that we had to do was really define exactly what we had done, which was identify the problem, come up with a potential solution to that problem, and recognize exactly what the potential path forward for us would be to actually design and implement on that product. And so to that end, it really came down to building out an initial business plan, which is what we're doing here. And so I think it's important to note that when you're first exiting the university, there's a tremendous amount that can be done with a small amount of money, including defining the problem, as we did, identifying the business opportunity that you're seeing on this screen, and then coalescing a team that can help move it forward. And so that's really where we went from here. And so that was really the start of Briteseed proper. So we took a look at how we would implement this product into the surgical ecosystem and how it would be purchased. And then we defined the team that would help us to build out this technology and this product. And to that extent, we brought in folks that had optics experience, signal processing experience, an R&D team. We brought in lead clinicians that would advise us, and we brought in folks that had expertise related to the milestones that we knew we were going to hit around implementing quality systems, product development, and so on. And at that point, we really started to move forward and think about how we're going to build out this technology that would make this product work. And we were able to go out, raise some initial financing, which I'll talk a little bit more about, for both private financing areas as well as from grants from the NSF and the NIH. And then in doing so and developing out that roadmap and technology development, we were able to bring in some key advisors that would help us to actually strategize on how, upon developing out that technology, what our business model would look like going forward and how we'd be able to de-risk it on the business front in addition to the technological front. And so that was important for us to gain credibility to move forward as a company. And so what I would say here is that I'd stress the fact that a tremendous amount can be done early on without a lot of money, right? You don't have to spend, $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 or more per month in a monthly burn to do the things that will considerably de-risk your venture. You can go out and precisely understand what that problem is, talk to clinicians, identify the business opportunity, gain support from key opinion leaders, meet with strategic partners, those companies that are active in your area, and understand what their needs are. And you can do that with a lot of leverage of being a student or being affiliated with a research institution and take advantage of that. So once we had begun to build out exactly what our technology was going to look like, how that would translate into a product, understand our go-to-market strategy, we recognized that it was time to go out and actually finance this entity. And so we began early on by joining business plan competitions, where we would actually travel to different parts of the U.S., hosted by different academic institutions, and do these various business plan competitions where you basically pitch your company, your idea, and your team. And it's a great opportunity for students to really hone in on their messaging, to road test a lot of the assumptions that are made around the business plan that were formed, and demonstrate that you guys have actually properly assessed the size of the opportunity properly. And so you get a lot of input from folks. And on top of that, you have the opportunity to actually win some money from these competitions. And so we raised probably $250,000 in non-dilutive award winnings through these competitions. I think that the biggest competition we were part of was the Rice Business Competition, where we came in second in the U.S. And that also linked us up to some angel investors that really helped us to build out our seed round, that initial round of financing. And so that was sort of how we moved forward first. Then we began to reach out once we had worked on our technology, on the side and started gathering some initial data, assembling that into small business innovation research grants through both the National Science Foundation and the NIH. And so we actually brought on a grant writer to help us and help our scientists actually build out those grants and make sure that we were placing our effort in the right places. And we were successful in doing that. And so, as success sort of begets success, we were able to leverage that into a final seed financing round of just about $2 million that allowed us to build out our core technology and the benchtop build of our initial product, which is a smart surgical grasper that we've now taken into porcine labs and demonstrate there. And so I think what's important to understand when you're thinking about what the critical tasks are going to be and how you're going to finance them is to really consider where you stand as a team or a company. Understand, for Briteseed, it was to build out that core technology and create the patent portfolio that would surround it, because we weren't a traditional translated technology. And so that was going to be our initial activity of research, and then to create milestones around that. And so we had to think about what resources we were going to need to accomplish that task, and then bring together the team and the additional resources that we would have to have in order to meet those milestones. And so from there, we brought together co-founders that actually had the expertise to perform those activities. But as we look forward, we're sort of closing out that sort of research area where we brought in the team members that have the expertise in that area. We've begun to partner with different groups that have helped us in that area. And our closest relationship is with a group called Insight Product Development, a design and development firm that's been around for 25 years, and we knew could help us with some of the project management aspects of the technology development. And now we're looking forward at what the team and the resources will need to be to go into product development, what relationships we're going to have with sensor makers and other service providers, and so on, and then build milestones around that. And so I think it's important for anyone who's coming out of academia or starting a new venture to be honest about what the key activities are going to be to add value to your company, and those will typically be in the form of technical de-risking, de-risking your FDA pathway, and so on, and then creating the team and lining up the resources to do exactly that. So in Briteseed's case, we've closed out that early stage of financing and those grants, and they've allowed us to create that initial technology and that initial benchtop build of the product. We're currently raising a $5 million Series A round that we're going to use to build our first tool and take us through the FDA process. And then after that, we'll be looking at building a second product that we know that potential strategic partners or purchasing companies find very valuable. And to that extent, we've already begun the relationships with those companies to understand what their needs are in our business pursuits to make us a more attractive company that could build a technology that could then be either licensed or bought by a larger company so that we could scale up our technology and get it out to as many patients as we can. So that's sort of the Briteseed story and some of the takeaways that we've had over the last couple of years. I'm happy to take any questions and excited to hear from Sarah as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Our next speaker today is Dr. Sarah Mays, who's the Vice President of Research and Development and co-founder of Alafair Biosciences. Alafair is a company spun out of the Christine Schmidt Lab at the University of Texas at Austin. In her current role, Sarah oversees preclinical and clinical work, as well as pipeline product development. She earned her master's in material science from the University of Michigan and her PhD in biomedical engineering from Texas. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thanks for this opportunity. My route is a little circuitous, similar to Jonathan's, in that while I was getting a master's, I was actually working full-time in the automotive industry. So I spent 10 years in the automotive industry, seeing things, work that you do meet a final product. And the last class I took of my material science and engineering degree was neural tissue engineering, and it spoke to me. So I moved over to biomedical engineering, and when I joined Christine's lab, I was looking for a translational project. And so my presentation is going to be the history of this translational project and product in a company I now work for. So we first identified the problem of abdominal adhesions way back when I joined the lab in 2008. Adhesions form following surgery, and they tether together tissues that would normally be separated, and this leads to a host of issues such as chronic pain, infertility, and sometimes death. It turns out this problem also carries a hefty healthcare burden of $3.5 billion annually, and that's just on hospitalization for revision surgery from adhesions. The gold standard currently available is Genzyme's Seprafilm, and Seprafilm is a hyaluronic acid-based technology. And while it's effective at preventing abdominal adhesions, it can't be used in minimally invasive procedures like the ones that Jonathan's company is creating tools for. So our thought, in Dr. Schmidt's lab, they had developed these cross-linked hyaluronic acid films, and that's the picture. Those are my hands back at many, many years ago, with these films that couldn't be handled. The idea was, well, maybe we can improve the handling properties of these films and turn them into a medical device to prevent adhesions, and would be able to be used clinically with laparoscopic deliverability. And so the first thing we did, like I said, I joined the lab in 2008. Beginning of 2009, we sent these films to surgeons. The reason why I want to point that out is because it's really important that you get the voice of the customer early on and establish those relationships with surgeons that may end up becoming your KOLs or key opinion leaders, like what Jonathan was talking about. So back early 2009, we sent them some films. The surgeons came back with, hey, these are the qualities I like about them. Yeah, you can't deliver these laparoscopically. So we worked with surgeons about a year and a half, iterating. We filed IP, and there was one surgeon in particular that was very interested in the project. His name is Dan Peterson, and he's a neurosurgeon here in Austin. And so he and I worked closely together to develop this prototype here you see on the right. And so he, along with his colleague, validated, yes, this technology has the strengths to be delivered laparoscopically, but does it work? And so Dan and I also created an animal model. And so toward the end of 2010, we conducted preliminary proof of concept work. We showed statistical significance in a rat abdominal adhesion model that not only can the product be handled, but it can also prevent adhesions. And so Dr. Peterson and I, along with a local entrepreneur named John Joyo Pratitno, we three decided, let's form a company. So this slide just simply details, hey, this is when we decided to form the company. We had a working prototype, great results. We had filed all of our IP. And then most importantly, we had enthusiasm. This is typically a long pathway. It takes many years. And if you're not passionate about what you're doing, the hard times can seem even harder. And so one of the first things we did after forming the company was, of course, negotiate the patent license agreement. And this is different from the pathway that Jonathan was referring to, where they were independent of the university. The intellectual property that came out of Christine Schmidt's lab was, of course, the University of Texas at Austin. So I just wanted to say some lessons learned in our experience, and those that I've talked to have also been through this, for how to negotiate a patent license agreement. The first thing is to go into it knowing it needs to be a win-win for both you and the university. So the university has a fiduciary responsibility, and you have to expect that they're going to want to be compensated for the technology that you're licensing. At the same time, don't be afraid to look at expanded fields of use. Even if you're planning to develop just, say, a medical device, later down the road, a company might be interested in licensing that technology from you for, say, cosmetic purposes. And so that can be a source of revenue for your company. Expect that there's going to be an upfront licensing fee. I think this can cause a lot of stress and back and forth. Just go into that expecting that, and try to spend more of your time and focus in your negotiations with the university on the royalty rates, because in some fields, particularly medical devices, the margins aren't incredibly big. So the difference between a 2% royalty rate versus a 3% royalty rate can have significant outcomes later on when you look at sales. Also, make sure that those that are listed as inventors on your invention disclosures and subsequently your patents in fact fit the definition of an inventor, per your attorneys and the USPTO. And finally, once the patent license agreement is signed, it still is a bit of a living document. You may have to make amendments depending on how your business plan is changed and what sort of products you end up taking to market. So getting to know the culture of your Office of Technology Commercialization and those at the university is important, particularly when you go to make those amendments. Your licensing specialist that you were working with may have, say, left the university. So you just want to make sure you maintain relationships and understand the culture there. Okay, I have a series of slides, one for each year since the company formed. And so just to orient everyone, green is funding, blue is the business, purple is all the science, and then we have regulatory, quality, and eventually clinical. So I'm just going to hit some of the highlights. In 2011, as I mentioned, we founded Alafair. I was still a student at the time, so although I could be a co-founder, I could not work directly for the company. And so the work that I conducted was supported through sponsored research agreements that came through Alafair Biosciences through the proper pathways through the university. The first person we hired was John Prietno, and he served to support the business. Dan Peterson, the other co-founder, is a full-time neurosurgeon. So he was acting CEO, but not working for the company. So we signed the PLA, we did a business plan together, and we started raising money. So both dilutive and non-dilutive. Dilutive meaning that it takes away from the total equity, and non-dilutive, like from grants, funds that don't reduce your equity. One of the things I want to point out early on, of course, this is just within months of forming the company, we established relationships with regulatory consultants because the regulatory path has a significant, it changes your business plan significantly depending on what regulatory path your product or intended products are going to go through. So 2012, some of the important points were we raised money. We closed out a friends and family round. And once we had money, we started building out the company. We hired a chief scientific officer. Our CSO is Scott Zacco, and Dr. Zacco and I both graduated from Christine Schmidt's lab. So he was very familiar with the technology. He and I both are also co-inventors on the original technology that we licensed from UT. We also hired an MBA from UT Austin to help out with the business side of things. At the end of 2012, it was determined that going for an abdominal adhesion barrier was probably not going to be our path. And the reason why is because of the significant capital required to get an abdominal adhesion barrier to market. And part of this is because of the pre-market approval pathway demanded by the FDA. So we went back and took a look at our foundational technology and looked at all the different products that we could develop and decided that a tendon protector would be the fastest path to revenue. And this is a 510K pathway. It's a less arduous regulatory path and requires significantly less capital to reach market. So in 2013, we had to develop a new business plan. This is a different type of product. I also graduated and joined the team formally in May of 2013, and right after I joined, we opened up a lab. And the lab we opened up is an IP-free zone on the University of Texas at Austin campus. I highly recommend that you look at your university and talk to them about what IP-free zones exist, because you have access to all of the resources at the university and at a discounted, usually a lower monthly payment than certainly as you would find off campus here in Austin. We continued to raise funds. We had been awarded the Phase 1, Phase 2 STTR NIH grant, and I just want to make one comment about that. We had submitted the grant based on development of an abdominal adhesion barrier, and a lot of our language in the grant was written loose enough so that when we changed paths to develop a tendon protector, we still could hit all of the specific aims as originally intended. Right, so we defined a new product, we identified the pathway, we identified our predicate device. I have a whole line here for packaging and regulatory. I can't stress how important packaging is. In some ways, I would say it's as important as the product you're developing, because, as the device you're developing, because it does represent the sterile barrier between the patient and the product. And of course, we launched our quality management system. 2014, this was a great year for funding because we were awarded the Texas Emerging Technologies Fund, and that was no small feat. That took many, many months of interviews and pitches across the state of Texas, and we were awarded $2 million. And the greatest thing about that is it allowed our business team to focus on the company and not just on fundraising. We also hit a design freeze, which was significant for the scientific development of the product. And then we outlined our non-GLP preclinical testing that would later be submitted to the FDA for our submission. We also started biocompatibility testing and shelf life testing. Sorry about that. 2015, this was a year heavy of science. So we finished up our biocompatibility testing, and it took about a year to get through that. Our GLP safety and efficacy testing, we had to develop a model ourselves. There was no model available for tendon protectors. If you are making a product and there's already a model available, that is a much faster way forward. So definitely consider that when you're selecting what product you're going to develop first. We have patents issuing, and then on my flight back from finishing up our chicken tendon model that we developed, I immediately started writing the 510K application. I knew our testing had ended, and while they were writing the report, I started writing the 510K. 510Ks, if you download them and take a look at them, they can seem deceivingly underwhelming. It takes a long time. Give yourself a few months to write your FDA submission, even if it's just a 510K, which is, like I said, seemingly a small feat. We closed out our STTR and moved on to 2016. This was a very exciting year. We filed our 510K in February. The FDA has 60 days to respond. On day 59, we got a response with a few light questions. We responded a couple weeks later and then received 510K clearance. And that was very exciting. At the same time, in typical startup fashion, we were running out of funds. So it was a very exciting time for the period for the company, as you can imagine. Yay, we got a 510K clearance. Oh, are we going to close this Series A round? So luckily that happened one right after the other. With the new Series A funding, we were hoping to get to launch, and also we initiated a new QMS software. So the software for your quality management system is really important, especially if you're planning to go all the way to market and handle customer complaints, recalls. Make sure that you're using a system that is sophisticated enough to handle these sorts of demands. And then as you can see, the conferences, now we've got this new color here, light blue, because we're starting to go to clinical conferences. And it's very different as a scientist. I'm used to presenting at scientific conferences, and now I'm presenting at clinical conferences. So that's a significant shift. The other thing that happened last year was we hired a full-time CEO. and he saw us through a production agreement with a contract manufacturer. So this year, we are in the process of transferring manufacturing, so we are almost to market. We look forward to launching the product later this year. We are going through pilot runs, planning our production runs, and of course looking at post-production. With post-production, we are now establishing relationships with distributors and looking forward to conducting clinical evaluation with our KOLs once we have launched the product. So all of those slides combined together, this is one snapshot of sort of the history of the company. And one of the things I want to point out is that you often hear of the valley of death as you move from the lab out to, out of the lab. But there's actually two valleys of death, and the second one happens right after you get regulatory clearance. So a lot of companies saying, oh, once I get FDA clearance or FDA approval, it's going to be easy. But in fact, then taking that technology that is approved or cleared through transfer manufacturing and launching it into the market is also another valley. So this is what we look like when we're taking professional photos. Greg Brophy is our CEO, and he's joined us this past December. John Joyo Prayitno is here in Austin. Actually, all the rest of us are here in Austin. And all of us, except Greg Brophy, graduated from UT Austin. So we are definitely a UT Austin family. This is our board of directors. I want to point out in the bottom right corner, Dan Peterson. He co-founded the company with John Joyo Prayitno and me, and was serving as our CEO until last December. And I just want to snapshot of our clinical and scientific advisory board, in particular Tom Czeswiak, who used to be the VP of biosurgery for Genzyme and has history in developing anti-adhesion technologies and taking them to market. He has been absolutely invaluable, as well as our clinicians that have served as our KOLs. And then this is professional photos of our technology. I can't tell you how exciting it is to see this sort of thing, because you are in a lab, you're a student, you're developing technology, and years later there's professional photos on marketing documents for an FDA-cleared device. It's very exciting. It's a lot of hard work, but this is what the hydrogel technology now looks like for our tendon protector. These are some other marketing pages from our marketing materials, just to show you guys that you take attributes and customer requirements early on and turn them into what you will present to the sales force and also the clinicians eventually. And it's so fun. Like, this is my hand. This is, in my office, taken by a professional photographer, and it's overwhelming to see it come to fruition. So definitely, if you are passionate about your product, your technology, seeing it through to product is well worth all of the wait. These are more pages from our marketing materials. And here you see a histology slide from our chicken tendon study, which was used for FDA submission. And finally, here's how to apply VersaWrap tendon protector, which is our first product. And I think I'll end here. Our pipeline products, so in true fashion, our base technology can be developed to many different products. We would love to develop the adhesion barrier one day when we have enough funding, but here are some other ideas we have in the works for our next product. And that, I will end there.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah. Now we'll move on to the questions. I would encourage you to please continue submitting questions in the lower left hand of your screen, and we'll get to as many as we can. Our first question is, how do I go about launching a startup after graduation with the help support of a faculty member or professor? So maybe, Sarah, I'll direct that one to you first, since you spun right out of that Christine Smith's lab.
Yeah, sure. So probably the most important thing is making sure that the work that you did for the company or that will return to a company is separated from the work you did for the university. So separate lab notebooks and making sure that you outline what the goal of the work is at the top of the page. There is a significant difference between work that you are conducting to support a grant or university funding versus work you are conducting to answer questions that will lead to a for-profit entity. So that's one piece of advice, to make sure that you're separating out your work. The other piece of advice is to contact your Office of Technology Commercialization, or the office that will help you through these procedures. And in particular, there's probably an Office of Compliance. So, sitting down and talking with those individuals who have probably helped another student and professor before, they'll probably be able to help guide you with whatever is required at that particular university.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Sarah. I'll direct this next question over to Jonathan. Are there any resources available to recent graduates to help guide them through the process of launching a startup?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things you can do that it takes a little bit of initiative, but there's some good starting points for you. I think first is there are a lot of good books that have recently been written in the area of entrepreneurship, and specifically on entrepreneurship in the medical space. And I think Biodesign is sort of the number one text I would suggest going towards. They do a really nice job of really creating a process for a young entrepreneur to look at when it comes to truly understanding what the problem is that you're trying to solve in the clinical area, making sure that you refine a potential solution that could work. To Sarah's point, it's got to be something that can make it through, sort of the patent system as well as through the FDA. So understanding all of the potential risks in moving technology forward is an important one, and that gives a pretty good overview of the sort of risks that you're going to take on, but then also some of the strategies that you can employ. Two other books that I would suggest looking at, one is Venture Deals by Brad Feld. It's a really nice book on financing and understanding where you're likely going to be able to raise money depending on the stage of your company, and also shares some really useful hints on the type of solicitation documents that you're going to need to generate. So whether it be that sort of early executive summary, that 1 or 2 pager that you send out to as your sort of calling card for the company, to larger offering documents that you'll have to create, like the presentations that you typically take into to introduce yourself to in longer form meetings. So that's a really good book. And then the last one I would say that's really useful if you didn't go to law school is The Entrepreneur's Guide to Business and Law. And I believe that was a book that was written by a pair of Yale professors, but a very good pragmatic text on some of the legal issues that you'll face, whether that be in hiring or dealing with disclosures to going out and getting trademarks and so on. So a lot of good practical information in that one. But beyond that, I think that you should look into your local ecosystem, and that may be centered really at your institutional level, or maybe outside of the gates of your institution at some of the accelerators and incubators that may exist that you could take part in, so you can really introduce yourself to some of the other folks that are active in the space. I know in Chicago we've got a couple great ones. Matter is one that hosts more than 100 medical companies that work out of there, and they bring in a lot of speakers that lecture on different things, and then have folks that can provide services. And there's some that are sort of nationwide. There's a virtual accelerator called MedTech Innovator, which is a really great one. I'd suggest taking a closer look at. They get about 500 applicants per year, but then whittle that down to a number of companies that then get support from experts in the area. And then I know that the Texas Medical Center, which is a great group of hospitals, the largest medical center in the world down in Houston, has created an innovation lab specific for medical devices. And so there's similar accelerators like that, all around the U.S. And so I'd look at those that you can take advantage of, even beyond what the university may offer when it comes to entrepreneurship and innovation.
Thanks, Jonathan. We also had just a few questions come in while you were talking. Do you mind repeating the names of those books as well as those authors so people can jot those down?
Yeah, absolutely. So one is Biodesign. That is written by, it's a couple different folks, but Josh Makower, Makower, and Paul Yock are two of the authors. The other one is Venture Deals by Brad Feld, who is the co-founder of Techstars. And the last one is The Entrepreneur's Guide to Business Law. And that is by Constance Bagley, Bagley. And I'll drop these into the chat as well.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Jonathan. Sarah, I'll direct this next question to you. You might have touched on this a little bit, but if you want to expound. We had a question, how do you handle working for a company while you're still a graduate student? Can you give us a little more detail about how you handled that and what are some of the intricacies of working for that company while you're still in grad school?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure that you keep your documentation clear and separate. So work that you are doing to answer questions that were proposed in a grant proposal or other funding through the university need to be separated from questions that you're answering for a for-profit entity such as a startup company. You also want to make sure that your funding is coming through the proper pathways, such as a sponsored research agreement. That's one of the things I mentioned. So even our very first rat model, so for instance, Dr. Schmidt, she had an IACUC-approved rat protocol already open, but that was through grant funding. And so what we did is we set up through the Office of Compliance and Office of Technology Commercialization, we set up a sponsored research agreement so that the work I was conducting was documented separately and was conducted using funds that were siphoned through the proper channels. So that is my best advice. Keep everything separated and make sure that your funding is coming through the proper channels. And that can take time, so just be patient.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Sarah. Jonathan, I'll direct this to you, given your legal background. There's a question that says, while looking for partners, how do you protect the idea or product from predatory companies? Is patent process the only way? Are there cheaper and faster ways?
Right. So first I would say it's important to understand that that no venture will move forward in a vacuum. And so you're going to have to engage with folks at some point. And I think the question is how you decide what needs to be disclosed in order to move those relationships forward at what time. And so if you have a friendly conversation with a potential individual or organization that you might find as a partner that you have sort of non-confidentially, I think the next step would to organize to have some kind of a confidentiality agreement that you can put in place. And you can find sort of templates online. And obviously, if you have access to a lawyer, it's helpful to make sure that you get some support in what you draft and share. But once you're under a confidentiality agreement, that doesn't mean that you should just go out and start passing along all of your your secrets, and those could be business secrets or technological secrets. I think it's really important to understand what the motivation for each conversation you're having is. And if you do look like you're going to share information, especially if it's non-confidential information, then it's really important to have thought about what your intellectual property protections look like. And to the questioner's point, patents are certainly the first way that you typically go about doing that. What's called a provisional patent application is a relatively simple device for gaining some legal protections. This is basically a cover sheet that gets placed on top of some drawings or some early technological disclosures that are written up and submitted to the patent office for just a couple $100, and that protects you and your subsequent filings, the more formal filings later. So it's not as expensive as maybe you'd be worried about. If you were to get a full patent prosecuted, that costs $10,000 or more to have it drafted and filed. But secondly, there are trade secrets. If you're dealing with a formulation of some kind that can't be readily reverse engineered and you haven't disclosed it in any way, you can simply protect that documentation, and that would be suitably protected. But it's really, patents are sort of the bread and butter of the medical device world, and so I think trying to find someone that can help with those early patent submissions are going to be important anyway, and typically a lot of lawyers understand the difficulty of young entrepreneurs in protecting themselves and are helpful early on, knowing that the bulk of their work will come as the technology becomes more de-risked. And so I think it's important to get out and create those relationships with lawyers earlier on, but being mindful about how you spend your money.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jonathan. Oh, we just have a few minutes left, so I'm going to have one more question. There's a number of specific questions that have come in, so we'll go ahead and pass those along to the presenters so they can answer those individually. We'll keep it to general questions here. So the last question I have, I'll direct it to Sarah first, and then Jonathan, you can speak up later if you have anything to add, is besides reading scientific literature, what are some other ways young students can come across major problems in the medical field? So speaking more about user needs as well as defining business opportunities.
Sure. Scientific conferences are a wonderful avenue for understanding what the problems are. Anywhere from posters to oral presentations to in the networking events that occur around scientific conferences, and seeing face-to-face clinicians that deal with these problems on a daily or weekly basis, or other students that are looking at a similar problem or similar technology that could be used to solve similar problems. So I would say, besides the literature, going to conferences or other opportunities in your area, such as there are entrepreneur groups, there are incubators that hold networking, happy hours or coffees. Oftentimes your department, like your biomedical engineering department or whatever department you're in, may have speakers. Sometimes those speakers are clinicians, or there will be clinicians in the crowd that you can introduce yourself to and ask thoughtful questions about things, the problems that he or she are facing that are common.
Yeah,
great, thanks,
I would follow on to that. I think that's great. I think the first step is really to identify sort of what gets you excited, what areas in the hospital or in other areas of care make you passionate. And so it could be recalling a particular disease or issue that a family member had to deal with is a great starting place, because going through the process of starting a company is a rigorous one, and if you're not passionate about the problem that you're solving, you're not going to, you're very likely not going to be as successful as if you were. And so once you've done that, once you've really thought about, hey, for Briteseed, it was looking at the operating room. It was getting, to Sarah's point, in front of surgeons. And so that could be at society meetings, but it could also be by going directly to hospitals and looking for folks that are engaged in that area that you're interested in. And so that can be a little bit daunting, but certainly as a student, you can approach, if you're near a teaching hospital, maybe approach a department that may have students, medical students that are dealing with the area of the hospital that you're interested in, and engaging with them to see if they would be interested in potentially setting out to solve a problem in the area that you guys have a common bond with, and then getting in front of professors that are faculty members in that area and start talking to them about what problems they deal with, right, on a daily basis. Or maybe they would introduce you to, the nursing staff or other key stakeholders within the hospital that have to deal with issues on a daily basis. So I think that as bioengineers, we're sort of built to be cross-disciplinary individuals, and I think that reaching out to some of the different areas outside of our comfort zone in the hospital is certainly something that gives us an edge in the area of innovation and entrepreneurship. And so, I would suggest reaching out to some of those folks. I do know that there is a network of medical students out of, I think it's WashU, that have created a network of med students interested in innovation from a number of different medical schools around the U.S. And they are looking to partner with folks like us to solve those problems. And so, maybe some Google searching could help find some groups that involve med students or young folks trying to solve issues as well, and then it comes down to just pairing up.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, both of you, for presenting today and answering those questions. We just have a few final announcements, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up the webinar. So that link that you see on the screen, we do have webinars coming up later this fall. I encourage you to check out that link and see what other topics will be discussed later this year. Also, just a reminder that the BMES annual meeting is October 11th through the 14th this year in Phoenix. As part of the industry program, for those of you who are interested in technology transfer and venture funding, we will have some tech transfer pitches to companies, for licensing or sponsored research. And then for those looking for funding, we will have pitches in front of venture capitalists at the BMES annual meeting. So definitely be on the lookout in your email for some more information over the summer. And if you'd like to be proactive and reach out, you can email industrycommittee@bmes.org. That concludes our webinar, so I want to thank you for joining us today. Please also stay online to take that survey. We really appreciate your feedback, and let us know how we did. I'd also like to remind you that the webinar is being recorded. These slides and the archived audio will be available on the BMES Education e-learning page on the website. You'll also receive an email from Michelle Schiappio once the archived materials have been posted. We hope you'll join us again, and thank you very much for your time today. Have a great day.